Central banking, people always have to remember this. The Fed and other central banks are not creatures of the free market, of free market enterprise capitalism. They are absolutely not. Even though they're associated with it, they're actually the antithesis of it, because it's managing fake money and fake credit, and that just distorts everything. So in my opinion, that kind of a system, the fiat system, the central banking system, doesn't deserve credibility. So good riddance that the people are finally waking up to this.
This is Little by Little with Andy Schectman.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Little by Little. I know this is a different setting than I normally sit in, and from now on, after this episode, you'll be seeing me in a new studio that we have built, and lots of exciting things to be announced in the next week or two, but that's for another time. Today, I'm thrilled to have with me someone I've followed for a very long time, fellow Minnesotan, so no matter what, I know he's a good dude. Nick Giambruno, the founder of the Financial Underground, and I have followed you, Nick, mostly in your writings and work with Doug Casey, who, from a standpoint of being logical, maybe the most logical person I've ever read. So I'm sure a lot of that has rubbed off on you. What a cool guy to spend time learning under. Want to welcome you here. Thanks for jumping in. And how's it going? What's going on with you?
Well, it's going great. Thanks for having me, Andy. And yeah, it's been wonderful working with Doug over the years. I really could not have asked for a better mentor. He's really a philosopher and an investor. And yeah, I've learned a lot with Doug over the years.
You know, before I ask you the 5 or 6 questions that I just have to ask you. Give me one anecdote, one story that sticks out, a Caseyism, something you learned along the way from Doug, because I rarely have ever met anyone like him who sees the world quite the way he does. If someone said, give me one nugget, Doug Casey, what would it be?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, he's known for being quote unquote controversial. I don't find him to be, people think of him like that, but I don't think him to be controversial. I think he just tells it like he sees it. And that kind of fearless truth telling, I think, is desperately needed. And so, yeah, that's one aspect of him that I truly admire. And so I've traveled around the world with Doug. We've been to some really fun and weird places, from Haiti to Zimbabwe. So we have a ton of anecdotes and stories from all the interesting characters and adventures we've had along the way.
Well, I'd love to sit and have a beer with you one night and hear some of those stories. That's for another time, I guess. But I'm thrilled that you're here, and certainly I can vouch for, what kind of guy he is, and a wonderful person to learn your craft under. And speaking of being all around the world, you've spent your career helping people prepare for the kinds of crises that most people would rather ignore. And that's kind of the problem about being in the gold industry as well. Most people don't want to hear why we're telling people to buy gold, such as currency collapse or de-dollarization or geopolitical chaos. So I'll ask you this. What first opened your eyes to the cracks in the system? And what convinced you that the average person actually needs an exit plan or a plan B?
By far is learning about money, because I can separate my life into 2 different phases: when I understood money and when I didn't understand money. And that was basically taking the red pill. Why do these pieces of paper have value? What gives them value? Most people don't think of this. And it's likened to a fish doesn't think about the water, doesn't recognize the water until something becomes polluted or something becomes wrong. And that's what most people think. And it's even worse than that. They think the money has to come from the state, which it absolutely does not. And I liken it to, you go transport yourself back in time to the Soviet Union and you ask people, where do shoes come from? And they say, oh, the government has to make the shoes. Who else could make the shoes? Of course, somebody else can make the shoes. And the same thing is with money, but it's even more prevalent and widespread, that mentality, We laugh at these people who used to live in the Soviet Union who think like this, but you shouldn't laugh because most people have exactly the same mentality as it comes to money. So when I understood how the money system works, how money works, and it's actually not that complicated. You don't need a PhD. You don't need all of these degrees and a bunch of experts to tell you. It's very simple. Money is a tool for sending value through time and space. That's it. That's all it is. It's nothing fancier than that or more complicated than that. And once you go down that rabbit hole, that's what opened my eyes, and I think was one of the most important thing.
Well, speaking of money and cracks in the system, one of the biggest cracks that you've pointed to, and myself included, is the U.S. dollar. We could probably spend all day talking about that, but with institutions like the BRICS developing alternatives, central banks stockpiling gold, and the U.S. running massive deficits, where do you see the dollar heading over the next 5 to 10 years? And is, in your mind, it a slow erosion, like the name of the show, little by little, then bang all at once? Or is it just that bang all at once, sudden reset? What do you see in the future?
Yeah, well, I think we've been going through that slow erosion since, you got to take the long view, since 1971. And if you kind of look at the compound average growth rate of the money supply, which is the real what inflation is, it's about 7% per year. And that's not nothing, 7% per year. And some years it's worse, some years it's better, but that's what we're looking at. That's the steady. But I think, it's like the Hemingway said, gradually, then suddenly. I think we're getting to the suddenly part. And I know people have said this for decades, but I really think that where the rubber hits the road, and why is it different now than last time? Than the last time the dollar, was on the verge of collapse, say in like early 1980s. The difference, in my opinion, is because they've run out. The debt crisis is finally here because the interest expense on the debt is more than these, so-called Defense Department budget, and it's only getting worse. And if you look at that's the key to understanding it, in my opinion, is the Treasury market, because that's going to be the engine of the suddenly phase where it's really going to blow up. Is the Treasury market, and that's fueled by government spending. It has geopolitics effects. It's understanding that Treasury market is really key to looking at when this thing is going to blow up. But to be honest, nobody can figure out when the precise moment it's going to blow up. You can just, though I think it's important, just you see where this train is going. You don't, this train is headed off a cliff. You don't need to know exactly when it's off the cliff. Just get off the train is how I see it. So yeah, I think, it has been a steady erosion, and that's in the best case scenario. The US dollar is the best of these currencies, and it's losing 7%. They're debasing it by 7% on average per year. And that's the best out of all of the fiat currencies, and they only get worse than that. I mean, you can look around the world, and see all these other toilet paper currencies. So what we have here is, something is going to change. The post 1971, post World War II financial order is about to change, and I don't know nobody knows exactly what it's going to look like, but I can tell you that it will involve dollar debasement, and you want to look at ways you can protect yourself from that.
Yeah, a couple of comments that come to mind. I think it was Doug Casey who coined the phrase "the prettiest mare in the glue factory," that being the U.S. dollar. And when I think about the Treasury market, certainly I agree. I think that is where the cracks will be. I think that is where the problems lie. And maybe they're already starting to surface with the Treasury buying back $10 billion in longer maturity Treasuries last week by financing it by selling short-term Treasuries, which is insane. At the same time, seeing the Fed come in quietly the week prior and not call it QE, I don't know what the hell they're trying to call it, but buying $48 billion or so in a sampling of 3, 10, and 30-year Treasuries. Where's the demand is kind of what you're getting at. And I think that's where we are heading in a government or in a setting where weaponization of the Treasury market, where inflation, where volatility in the Treasury market, things that we never talked about are now rearing their head. I would completely and totally agree with you. And one other point that you made that really I think would help most people understand, people who don't follow your work and my work and just the people we come in contact with every day here in the States, who wouldn't have any idea why to own gold. And a perfect example of what you speak of since 1971. I was born in 1970. And in 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window, it was at $35 an ounce. Well, just a couple weeks ago, it touched 3,500 for a brief moment. We're back off just under 34 here, but that's a 99.5% reduction in the value of the dollar. It's gone down in terms of its relationship to gold, or gold's gone up in its relationship to the dollar by almost 100 times. It's very interesting when you look at it that way, because most people don't. And I think it's a very important piece, and I agree with what you said. Appreciate that. And so that brings me to gold, something that I have followed your writings and your videos, and I know you've talked a lot about gold, written about it. I'll ask you kind of a trite question, but one that I think matters, and one that matters to me. What matters more for investors right now, the price of gold or the principle behind holding it?
Yeah, I think getting to the situation we're at, it's obviously the principle, but you asked a question before too. Why own gold? I mean, it's so silly to me. That it's such an easy, it's like, why own money? Yes, but most people don't see it that way. Most people have never seen a gold coin or a gold bar in their entire life, which is astounding. Think of that information asymmetry that you have, that people who get this have, that they get money, and the vast majority of humanity does not. They think these Chuck E. Cheese tokens that governments give the people are money. It's really crazy if you think about it. It's an enormous information asymmetry. But yes, I mean, look, gold. You want gold for any time, because it's just money. You need money for any time. But it's particularly acute right now when the current paper fiat system is breaking down at an accelerating rate. Countless millions, perhaps, I don't know how many exactly, but millions and millions of people throughout history have been victimized by inflation and even hyperinflation. And that's kind of what we're looking at. I know it's unthinkable to most, but once these things really take off, they can have a life of their own. So yeah, we're looking at a very, very serious time. And even if it's not, even if things get better, gold is still there, is still important as money too, as a savings vehicle. So, you kind of want to have it in any case. I mean, it just seems so silly to me that people would even, question, oh, why should I own gold? I mean, people do. I mean, traditional people and mainstream folks and most people don't own gold. And, to me, it's just so fundamental. Like, why own money? It's basically the same question.
Yeah, thought that comes to mind. You're a young guy. You're younger than me. I don't know how old you are. I'm 54. We both grew up in Minnesota.
41.
You're 41, which is what I'm getting at. And, I know right now you mentioned you're in Argentina, but much of what you do, you travel around the world. I live in Florida now. For a young guy, I would assume that if you were back home in Minnesota, 1 out of every 50 people that you would associate with have any idea why to own gold. The people that you grew up with, the people that you would be friends outside of work, who maybe you don't talk about what you do all the time, who don't know what you're all about. It's that way with me, and I'm 13 years older than you. I find that most people in the United States have a misconception about what gold is. To me, gold is wealth. And when I started in this industry 35 years ago, my father said, Andy, there's only one rule and one rule only, or I'll fire you. He said, you'll buy some gold or some silver every 2 weeks when you get paid, period. That's the only rule. Now, I'm like, okay, cool, Dad. I've owned the company for 2 decades outright, but I've honored my promise to him. He won't fire me anymore, Nick, but I've honored my promise to him, and I have purchased gold and silver, something, even if it's one coin, every 2 weeks for 35 years. It was the best gift I've ever been given. Not only to learn the laws of compounding, to work in my favor rather than against me, as most people experience compounding of effort or time or interest, but because it's wealth. That's what it's taught me. It's wealth. It's wealth that's outlived 2 world wars, German hyperinflation, the Great Depression, and everything else the world has ever thrown at it. So my question to you as an aside is, do you find people outside the United States, even of your own age group, perhaps, understand gold better, or is this universal that the powers that be have done such an amazing job at whitewashing the reasons to own gold, even though at the same time the central banks are buying it hand over fist, highlighting its importance, the truth behind it? Is this just something that the West is afflicted by, or do you find in your travels that gold is more acknowledged, respected, and understood around the globe, even in Argentina, than it is here in the United States?
It really depends where you go. So, in certain parts of the world, certainly in Asia, certainly gold is more recognized, and they never really lost that affinity for it culturally. In other parts of the world, they default to U.S. dollars, which I think is, it's better than the peso, for example. Incidentally, peso is a funny word because it means weight. Peso means weight. Well, weight of what? Weight of gold and silver. When you hear the peso, I mean, you hear the currency, any country that has a currency that has the name peso in it, it's usually laughed at, and it for good reason, because it's junk. But the origin of the word peso means weight, and weight of gold or silver. But they've obviously perverted that over the years. But yes, it really depends, and I think that doesn't change economic reality. It just represents an information asymmetry. And yet, while that is frustrating, while not more people understand the benefits of gold and silver, that nonetheless, that is, I view that as an information asymmetry and an opportunity for it to go up higher once people inevitably do figure it out as economic reality asserts itself. So yeah, it really depends where you are. Some regions more so than others.
Yeah, our mutual friend Rick Rule often says to me, I just did an interview with him the other day. He said it again. I've known Rick for 20 plus years and done a lot with him, and I've learned a lot from Rick, just as you have from Doug. And he will say openly that the total allocation of gold and gold-related equities amongst the entire infrastructure in the United States, from Joe and Jane Sixpack to the Harvard Endowment Fund, is 0.5%. It's really not noticed. So when you talk about a contrarian play, or are we early in the game, I think we still are. The public is blissfully asleep as it pertains to the merits of owning gold and silver. Let's stick on that thread, and I appreciate your candor on all of this. We've seen a wave of gold flowing into the New York COMEX vaults from London, Switzerland, Dubai, Hong Kong, Singapore, all over the world. And the central banks continue to aggressively build their reserves at levels no one's ever seen. The deliveries into COMEX are off the charts. The largest gold delivery, to my knowledge, ever in the history of the COMEX was just last month, about $8.5 billion worth. But that's been something we've seen over and over and over since November. We become net importers of gold for some reason. I have my own suspicions. But what do you make of this movement? What's the signal here, not only for price action, but more so for gold's role maybe in the monetary system in the years ahead? Do you have any views on that?
Yeah, everybody is just kind of speculating on this. Nobody knows for sure, but one thing is for sure is that major monetary resets typically follow big movements of gold. If you follow what happened historically, when the London gold pool broke, it was kind of a harbinger for what happened, a few years later in 1971. So when you follow these big movements of gold, something is afoot. And what you're talking about with the COMEX, who are these people? I mean, are they so big that it would have to necessarily be a government entity that private entities aren't capable of really importing this much gold? So it's very strange. And then you also have strange comments from Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, Musk previously talking about, and Trump himself talking about auditing Fort Knox. And Fort Knox is an interesting case too, because, that's the previous audits were complete scams. I mean, anybody can look into that and just see that it was just a joke. I mean, they haven't audited it, and the audits they did previously were only a tiny portion of the gold, and they didn't really. They were farces, basically. They were spectacles. So we have all these things lined up, and then on top of that, you have the situation with the budget deficits. I mean, Doge was the biggest attempt in my lifetime to cut government spending, and it fell flat on its face. They couldn't even cut 1%. They couldn't even cut a rounding error off of the federal budget. And this is the most intense effort at cutting spending in my lifetime, in most people's lifetimes, and couldn't even do a rounding error. And it's basically failed because they've just increased spending in other areas. So against this backdrop, you have all that's going on. I mean, you got to kind of connect the dots and put the pictures together, put the pieces of the puzzle together to see the big picture. And I think it paints a very positive picture for gold. It looks like there's going to be some kind of monetary system reshuffle or reset, and gold is always at the center of these. Think of it. Why is gold at the? If you look at previous monetary resets in U.S. history and in world history, they always have something to do with gold. That's not a coincidence. It's in the name. It's a monetary reset. So obviously gold is going to have a role in a monetary reset because it is money. So I think it's not going to be any different here. I think we're headed towards something like that.
Yeah, just a few strings to pull on that too. You bring up a lot of great points, and I just want to add a little context, a little color. You're the play-by-play guy. I'm the color guy in this sporting match. You mentioned all the gold that's come into the COMEX. Who's doing it? I remember in March, it was at that point the largest delivery, or pretty damn well near it. JP Morgan said it was for a client, a customer account, not their own, and it was over $4 billion. Who is that client? Is it the Treasury? Is it the Fed? Is it Warren Buffett? I guess we don't know, only to be almost over double here in the May contract. You mentioned the Trump administration and Scott Bessent coming out. Of course, his largest holding when running a hedge fund, he is a self-proclaimed gold bug, was gold. He did say that there would be a new monetary system within a new Bretton Woods, I think he said, within this regime, within this administration. What's he getting to? Perhaps maybe the craziest one was Trump on Easter Sunday with his tweet saying the golden rule of negotiating, he who has the gold makes the rules. Thank you. This on the heels of massive imports since November, more gold coming into the country than at any time since the end of World War II, which was the Bretton Woods Agreement, when everyone sent us their gold anyways. Something is afoot, and you're right. I do believe that in my soul. Maybe it's even a quiet reintegration into the monetary system. One thing that Judy Shelton said to me, who was Trump's nominee for Fed chair in 2016. Some people think, and I think that announcement is either tomorrow or next Friday, who his pick will be to run the Fed. She said, Andy, he has told me in no uncertain terms that on July 4th, 2026, he will issue gold-backed treasuries, 50-year duration to begin with, the 250th year anniversary of the country. Now, whether or not it happens, she said that on this show, that was what she believes that she was told by Trump, still in an advisory capacity. Interesting thought. The last piece is what you just said about Doge, and I think it's funny. The first time that we've seen austerity attempted in our lifetimes, both you and me, and all they were able to get rid of was $9.4 billion in cuts. Sounds like a lot of money. It is. I'd love to have $9.4 billion, but when you realize that the government adds $6 billion to the national debt every single day, that amounts to 37 hours worth of spending, and then we're back to the same old nonsense of, again, it looks like a $2.25 trillion deficit projected by the end of the fiscal year. Everything you say is spot on. Just to add a little color to it, I don't know if you have any comments to any of that, but I agree completely and totally with everything you just said.
Yeah, I always like to put things into context too. You always hear the word trillion thrown around. A trillion is an astronomical number. Think of it like this: if you earned $1 per second, 365 days per year, $1 per second, it would take you 32,000 years to make $1 trillion.
That's my favorite stat of all time, and I say it all the time. We think a lot alike, you and I. Think about definitely. That. I think the exact number is 31,688, but who's counting? Yeah. Point of it is that people don't get it, because most people who work a lifetime will make $1 million. They may not save it, but they'll make it over time. I'm sure they spent most of it. But the thing of it is that million sounds like billion, sounds like it's got to be. 31,688 years ago in seconds is insanity. And that's, you're right. And we talk about the debt, 36 trillion. What about the unfunded liabilities?
Oh, yeah.
That exceed 200 trillion. So anyways, you're right. And all of this stuff that you're saying is spot on. I really hope people are listening to what you're saying, because it's true. Almost done. Just a couple of questions left. And I do appreciate your time. How much of what's coming next is really about economics, and how much is about a deeper loss of trust in institutions, in currencies, and in leadership? Is it more about a loss of trust and faith, or is it about economics, or is it somewhere in between?
Yeah, it's somewhere. I think it's somewhere in between. I'm favorable to the Austrian school of economics, and that basically, in a nutshell, is about human action in the face of scarcity. So everybody has to make choices because we all have a limited amount of time on this earth. If anything, even if there's abundance in everything else, we have a limited time on this earth. But it just, you have to look at human choices in the face of scarcity. And I think that you can apply that to looking at the business cycle and so forth. But what you're talking about with the breakdown of trust in these institutions, I think it's well deserved. These institutions don't deserve trust. Does the Federal Reserve deserve trust? I think people need to remember the Federal Reserve is central banking generally is from the fifth plank of Marx's Communist Manifesto. If you want to go look that up, that's where it originates. The concept. I mean, it talks about the centralization of credit and money in the hands of a central bank. It's right there. So central banking, people always have to remember this. The Fed and other central banks are not creatures of the free market, a free market enterprise, capitalism. They're absolutely not, even though they're associated with it. They're actually the antithesis of it. Because it's managing fake money and fake credit, and that just distorts everything. So in my opinion, that kind of a system, the fiat system, the central banking system, doesn't deserve credibility. So good riddance that the people are finally waking up to this. It's basically people are figuring out, in my opinion, it's a scam that's been perpetrated upon the public. So that loss of confidence is well overdue.
Yeah, absolutely. Manipulating interest rates instead of letting the free market do so is in my mind, a large root cause of many of the problems that we face, the distortions and misallocations that it has created. We're beginning to see just how impactful that is. Last question, Nick, and I'll let you run. And then again, thank you for your time today, buddy. I hope our paths do cross. Maybe I'll see you at Rick Rule's show here in July. I think Doug will be there, but if you are, make sure you come say hello to me.
Certainly.
And that is, if you could leave our listeners with one truth about what's coming and how to prepare, what would that one truth be?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to make it three real quick, but they're related. It's about banks. People think they have money in the bank. So we've got money in the bank. Three things that people don't know about that. Number one, the money is not yours. Legally speaking, it's you have an IOU. It's very different than even a fiat currency and a Federal Reserve note in your hand. You have an IOU, a Federal Reserve note. That's what a bank deposit is. Number two, the money you think you own, which you don't, is not even there. They've loaned it out through fractional reserve banking. And ever since COVID, the banks are not even required to have any reserves on their deposits, which is insane. And number three, the money is not money. The money's fake. It's fake money that somebody can create out of thin air and you have to work for. So that is a very faulty system. And I think that's a very good segue into why gold, because the alternative is this traditional banking system where most people trust their life savings. So I know I kind of extended that to three, but I think, that kind of encapsulates the rottenness of the banking system and the financial system concisely, and why you want to look at sound alternatives.
Well said, brother. You're for a young guy, and pardon me for saying, someone who's in their 40s is young, but you are a young guy and a wealth of information and a chip off of the old Casey block. What is the best way for people to continue to follow what you're doing, who want to have a better understanding of ways to globalize your passport, your living, your expenses, or your finances, rather, your investments? What's the best way for people to follow what you're doing?
Well, my content is and work is published primarily on two places. The first, internationalman.com, and also financialunderground.com, where you get some more in-depth actionable insights into investing and these kind of strategies. So that's where folks can find me. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And thank you very much for the kind words too, by the way, Andy.
Yeah, man, well deserved, Nick. And I thank you for coming on. I will hope to see you again. We'll have you back on the show and hope to see you again and see what the world has in store for us a few months down the road. But until then, I hope you and yours stay well and appreciate you jumping in today.
Sounds good. Likewise. Thank you, Andy.
You got it, brother. Thank you.
Little by Little with Andy Schectman.